The 5-year-old girl looked up at the sky and started crying. Not because she was scared or hurt, but because, she said, the sun was the wrong color. It should be orange and getting dimmer, and the sky should be purple, not blue. She remembered watching her star die on a world that didn't exist anymore. Her parents thought she was just being dramatic, the way kids sometimes are, making up stories, playing pretend, but Emma kept insisting, with tears streaming down her face, that this wasn't her real home, that she came from somewhere else, somewhere far away, where the sun was dying, and everyone knew it was ending. She'd draw pictures of strange buildings and landscapes that no 5-year-old should be able to imagine. She'd talk about technology and concepts that were beyond her vocabulary. She'd cry at night, saying she missed her other family, the ones who didn't make it when the evacuation ships left. Her parents tried everything, different therapists, doctors checking for neurological issues. Maybe she'd seen something on TV or in a book that sparked these fantasies, but nothing explained the level of detail, the consistency of her stories, the genuine grief she displayed when talking about the world she said she'd lost. Finally, they found Dr. Marion Foster, a child psychologist who specialized in unusual cases and who had an open mind about consciousness and memory. Dr. Foster listened to Emma's stories without judgment, without trying to explain them away, and she suggested something unconventional. What if Emma's memories were real? Not from this world, not from this lifetime, but real nonetheless. Emma sat in Dr. Foster's office, playing with a set of building blocks while the adults talked. She was building something that looked like a tower with a dome on top, intricate and purposeful in her design. "Tell me about this," Dr. Foster said gently, sitting on the floor beside Emma. "What are you building?" Emma looked up with those serious eyes that seemed too old for her face. "It's an observatory, where we watched the sky and measured how much time we had left." Dr. Foster felt chills run down her spine. A 5-year-old shouldn't know what an observatory was, let alone be able to articulate its purpose in such a specific way. "How much time did you have left?" Dr. Foster asked carefully. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Not enough. We thought we had maybe 200 more cycles. But the calculations were wrong. The sun's energy dropped faster than the scientists predicted. We only had 50 cycles to evacuate everyone, and there weren't enough ships." Emma's mother, sitting on the couch, looked at Dr. Foster with desperate eyes. "You see what I mean? This has been going on since she could talk. At first we thought it was cute, an active imagination, but it's gotten more intense. She's having nightmares. She's grieving for people and places that don't exist." But Dr. Foster wasn't so sure they didn't exist. She'd studied cases of children with past life memories, though most were from Earth-based incarnations. This was different. This sounded like a memory from another world entirely. She asked Emma's parents if they'd be willing to try something unconventional, a gentle regression, using play and storytelling rather than hypnosis, to help Emma access and process whatever these memories were, whether they were real past life experiences or elaborate constructions of an unusual mind. Bringing them to the surface and working through them might help Emma find peace. The parents, exhausted and willing to try anything, agreed. Over the following weeks, Dr. Foster worked with Emma using art, storytelling, and gentle questioning to help her access and describe the memories that haunted her. And what emerged was a coherent, detailed account of a life lived on a dying world, in circumstances no child should be able to imagine but that Emma described with heartbreaking specificity. Emma's memories took Dr. Foster to a world she called Kilra. The name came out in Emma's voice but with an accent, a pronunciation that didn't quite fit with any Earth language. It was a planet orbiting a sun that, by the time of Emma's memories, had been slowly dying for over 3,000 of their years. In Emma's drawings and descriptions, Kilra was beautiful but haunting. The cities were built vertically, towers reaching toward the sky like fingers grasping for the fading light. Buildings were made from a material that looked like crystal but was actually compressed mineral, compounds that could store and amplify the diminishing solar energy. The sky wasn't blue like Earth's, it was a deep purple-violet color, something to do with the atmospheric composition and the quality of light their sun emitted. Emma could describe this in sensory terms that went beyond visual. She talked about how the air tasted, how the light felt on skin, how sounds traveled differently in their atmosphere compared to Earth. Emma's life on Kilra had been as a girl named Leary, older than Emma was now, maybe 12 or 13 by Earth standards, though age was measured differently there. Leary lived in the capital city of Varantis with her parents and younger brother. Her father was one of the astronomers who worked in the Central Observatory, tracking the sun's decline and calculating how much time their civilization had left. Through Emma's descriptions, Dr. Foster learned that Kilara's people had known for thousands of years that their sun was dying. It was an ancient red dwarf star that had been stable for billions of years but was now entering its final phase. The decline was slow by cosmic standards, taking place over millennia rather than suddenly. But it was inevitable and irreversible. The civilization had adapted to the gradual loss of light and heat. They'd developed technology to capture and store every bit of available energy. They'd moved food production underground, where artificial light systems could maintain agriculture. They'd built entire cities in the equatorial zone, where the sun's remaining warmth was strongest. But they'd also begun working on evacuation plans, sending exploration vessels to nearby star systems, searching for habitable planets where their people could relocate, building generation ships capable of carrying thousands of people on journeys that would take decades or longer. The problem was scale. Kilara's population numbered in the hundreds of millions. The evacuation ships, even the largest ones, could only carry a few thousand people each, and building the ships required enormous resources and time. They'd been working on it for centuries, preparing for the day when the sun would no longer support life on their world. Emma described all of this with a level of detail and consistency that was impossible to dismiss as childish imagination. She drew technical diagrams of energy systems. She explained astrophysical concepts like stellar evolution and planetary climate. She described social structures and political tensions that no 5-year-old could fabricate. Through gentle questioning over multiple sessions, Dr. Foster helped Emma access specific memories from Leary's life. She remembered going with her father to the observatory, climbing the long spiral stairs to the dome at the top where massive instruments tracked the sun and stars. Her father would explain what they were measuring, teaching Leary about their sun's composition, about how stars worked, about the inevitable end they faced. He didn't hide the truth from her. Kilara children were taught reality from a young age. They were growing up in a dying world and deserved to understand what that meant. Leary remembered standing at the observation window, watching their orange sun hang in the purple sky, knowing that it was dimmer than it had been in her parents' childhood, that it would be dimmer still by the time her younger brother grew up. The measurements her father took weren't just scientific data, they were countdowns, calculations of how many cycles they had before the surface became too cold to sustain their cities, before the last of the usable energy was gone. Emma described the emotional reality of living on a dying world. Everyone knew the end was coming, but life still had to be lived. Children still played and learned. Adults still worked and fell in love. There were still celebrations and art and moments of joy, but everything was shadowed by the knowledge that their world was temporary, that their civilization was running out of time. The government had established a lottery system to determine who would get places on the evacuation ships. It wasn't based on welfare status but on a complex algorithm designed to maximize genetic diversity, skill distribution, and the potential for the evacuated population to successfully establish a new civilization on whatever world they found. Families were rarely kept together. The algorithm determined that spreading family groups across multiple ships would prevent the total loss of genetic lines if a ship was destroyed during the journey. It was logical, but emotionally devastating. People were being asked to say goodbye to loved ones, knowing they'd likely never see them again. Leary's father had been selected for evacuation because of his expertise in astronomy. They needed scientists who could navigate by the stars, who could assess potential new homes. But the rest of Leary's family wasn't initially chosen. Her mother, who worked in education, wasn't considered essential. Leary and her brother were children, and the algorithm prioritized adults of reproductive age over minors who would consume resources during the long journey. Emma's voice would change when accessing these memories, becoming more mature, using words and concepts that weren't part of her 5-year-old vocabulary. Dr. Foster documented everything carefully, recognizing that this was either an elaborate dissociative fantasy or genuine memory from another life, another world. Leary remembered the day the revised calculations came back. Her father came home from the observatory with a face drained of color. The sun's energy output had dropped more dramatically than predicted. They'd miscalculated, had been too optimistic in their models. They didn't have 200 more cycles. They had 50, maybe less. Panic swept through the cities. The evacuation timeline had to be drastically accelerated. Ships that weren't fully ready were pressed into service. The lottery system was reevaluated, with new priorities given to those with skills needed immediately. Political pressure mounted to save the wealthy and powerful, to abandon the fare system for one that favored those with influence. Leary's father fought to get his family onto a ship. Any ship. He knew the math, knew that with only 50 cycles to evacuate hundreds of millions of people, most wouldn't make it. The ships they had could save maybe 10 million at best, which meant hundreds of millions would be left behind when the world became uninhabitable. Emma cried while describing this, her 5-year-old face contorted with grief that came from somewhere beyond her current experience. She talked about saying goodbye to friends, knowing they weren't selected for evacuation, about her father's desperate attempts to pull strings, to trade favors, to find any way to save his family. He succeeded, partially. He secured places for Leary and her mother on one of the last ships, but not for her younger brother. The child's slots were limited, and the algorithm determined that Leary, being older and healthier, had better survival potential. Her brother, who had a chronic illness that required ongoing treatment, was deemed a poor candidate for the hardship of generation ship life. The choice was impossible. Save one child, or save none. Leary's mother wanted to stay with her son, to face the end together, rather than abandon him. But her father begged her to go, to save Leary at least, to give their family a chance at continuation, even if not all of them survived. Leary remembered the last days on Kilata. The sun was noticeably dimmer now, the temperatures dropping. Some of the outlying cities were being abandoned as people migrated toward the equator, where the last evacuation ships were launching. The streets were full of people who knew they weren't getting off-world. Some were resigned, finding peace in staying with their homes and communities until the end. Others were angry, rioting, trying to force their way onto ships through violence. Security forces struggled to maintain order, while also dealing with their own grief. Many of them were staying behind too. Leary's last memory of her brother was painful. They stood in the departure area, a massive complex where families said final goodbyes. Her brother was crying, holding their mother, asking why he couldn't come to. No one had told him the truth. How do you tell a child they're being left to die because an algorithm determined they weren't worth saving? Leary's father wasn't on their ship. He'd been assigned to a different vessel, one that had already departed. They might end up at the same destination world eventually. But the journey would take decades, and there was no guarantee both ships would survive. This might be the last time Leary's family was together. She hugged her brother, memorized his face, tried to find words for a goodbye that encompassed everything, love and grief and guilt and desperate hope. But no words were adequate. How do you say goodbye when you know it's forever? The boarding alarm sounded. Leary and her mother had to go. Now. No more delays. They tore themselves away, moved toward the ship, looked back one final time to see Leary's father holding her brother, both of them crying, both of them waving. That image was Leary's last clear memory of Killara. Her father's face, her brother's small hand raised in farewell, the purple sky, and the dimming orange sun, and the world she'd never see again. The ship launched. Leary felt the acceleration, the strange sensation of leaving planetary gravity. She looked through the small window and watched Killara shrink beneath them, becoming just another point in the darkness of space. Emma described the journey with less detail, saying the memories became fragmented after leaving Killara. Life on the generation ship was difficult. Cramped quarters, strict rationing, psychological stress of being trapped in a small space with thousands of others, knowing you were traveling toward a destination you might not live to see. Leary grew up on the ship, reached adulthood, had children of her own, never saw her father or brother again, never knew if they'd survived. The ships had no way to communicate with each other across the vast distances of space. Each one was isolated, carrying its fragment of Keela civilization toward an uncertain future. Leary died on that ship at what would be considered old age, maybe 70 by Earth standards. She never set foot on a new planet. Her children would be the ones to arrive at the destination, to attempt building a new civilization in a new solar system. And then there was transition. The death experience that moved Leary's consciousness from that body, that life, into the space between. Emma didn't have clear memories of that in-between time, except for a sense of rest and healing, and eventually the choice or necessity to incarnate again, this time as Emma Martinez, born on Earth, a world so different from Killara, but that triggered memories every time she looked at the sky and saw it. was the wrong color every time she felt warm sunshine and remembered when sunlight had been precious and fading. During one session, Dr. Foster asked Emma what Leary had felt during those last moments on Keelara, saying goodbye to her brother and father. Emma's face crumpled with an expression of grief far too deep for a 5-year-old. "I felt guilty," she said in a voice that was partly Emma and partly something older. "Guilty that I was chosen and my brother wasn't. Guilty that I got to live and he had to die. I was older, healthier, more useful to the algorithms and calculations that decided who deserved to survive. But he was gentler than me, kinda. He would have made the new world better than I could. But he's gone and I'm here, and it's not fair." Dr. Foster felt her own eyes filling with tears. "Emma, Leary, whoever you are in this moment, I want you to hear something. The guilt you're carrying, it's not yours to carry. You were a child. You didn't design the lottery system. You didn't make the choices about who stayed and who left. You survived because you were chosen, but that doesn't make you responsible for those who weren't." Emma shook her head violently. "But I should have done something. Should have refused to go. Should have made them take him instead of me. And then you would have died and your brother would be carrying this same guilt. There was no good choice, Emma. There were only impossible circumstances that no child should have had to face. Keelara was dying, and the people there did the best they could with an impossible situation. But the guilt of survival doesn't belong to the survivors. It belongs to the universe that created a situation where not everyone could be saved." Dr. Foster guided Emma through a process of separating Leary's memories and emotions from Emma's current reality. Yes, these experiences had happened, or at least felt completely real to the consciousness that was now Emma, but they were from another life, another world. Emma didn't have to carry Leary's unprocessed grief as if it were her own. Leary didn't get to say a proper goodbye. Dr. Foster suggested she didn't get closure because she was torn away from her family while in the middle of loving them, in the middle of needing them. Maybe Emma can give Leary what she didn't get to have: permission to say goodbye, permission to release the guilt, permission to acknowledge that she did nothing wrong by surviving. Emma was quiet for a long time. Then she started talking, but not to Dr. Foster. She was talking to her brother from Keelara, to the child who had been left behind while she escaped. "I'm sorry I left you," Emma said, tears streaming down her face. "I wanted to stay. I wanted us to all be together, even if it meant dying together. But they made me go, and I didn't know how to refuse. I was just a kid and I was scared, and I didn't understand yet what it really meant to lose you." Emma sobbed, and Dr. Foster held her, letting the grief pour out. Grief that might be from actual past life experience, or might be some symbolic representation of loss and guilt that Emma's consciousness was processing. Either way, it was real in its impact, real in its pain. After several minutes, Emma's crying slowed. She took shaky breaths, her small body exhausted from the emotional release. "He forgives me," she whispered. "I can feel it. He doesn't blame me. He never did." Dr. Foster asked how she knew. "Because love doesn't end when people die," Emma said with simple certainty. "His consciousness is still out there, somewhere. Maybe he incarnated again too. Maybe he's here on Earth, living a different life. But the love between us, that doesn't go away. And he wouldn't want me to carry guilt for something I couldn't control." In that moment, Dr. Foster saw something shift in Emma's energy. The heavy burden she'd been carrying, the grief and guilt that had been making her cry whenever she looked at the sky, began to lift. Not disappearing entirely, but lightening, becoming bearable. Emma's parents noticed the change almost immediately. Their daughter, who had been sad and withdrawn, started smiling more, playing more freely. The nightmares decreased in frequency and intensity. She still talked about Keelara sometimes, still drew her pictures of purple skies and orange suns, but without the desperate urgency that had worried them before. Dr. Foster continued working with Emma for several more months, helping her integrate the memories, helping her understand that she could honor Leary's experiences while also fully living as Emma. She didn't have to forget Keelara, but she also didn't have to be trapped by those memories. Emma started saying things that surprised the adults around her. She talked about how lucky Earth was to have a stable sun, how people took for granted the abundance of light and warmth. She spoke about the importance of taking care of planets because losing one was losing everything. She showed unusual empathy for refugees and displaced people, saying she understood what it felt like to lose your home. Her kindergarten teacher noticed that Emma had an advanced understanding of astronomy and environmental science. When other kids were learning shapes and colors, Emma was drawing diagrams of solar systems and explaining stellar evolution, not showing off, just naturally expressing knowledge that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her 5 years of life. Dr. Foster documented Emma's case carefully, writing it up for academic journals focused on consciousness studies and children's unusual memories. She was careful not to make claims about whether Kilara was objectively real or not, but she presented the data honestly. The level of detail, the consistency across sessions, the emotional authenticity, the knowledge beyond Emma's age or education level. Other researchers became interested. Some wanted to investigate whether Emma might be accessing information through some psychic or telepathic means. Others wondered if this was a case of cryptomnesia, where Emma had been exposed to science fiction stories and incorporated them into false memories. Still others took the past life explanation seriously, treating this as potential evidence of consciousness surviving death and incarnating across worlds. Emma herself seemed unbothered by the academic interest. She knew what she remembered, knew it felt real to her, and that was enough. As she got older, entering first grade, then second, the memories began to fade somewhat, not disappearing, but becoming less immediate, less intrusive. By age 8, Emma could talk about Kilara the way someone might talk about a vivid dream or a movie they'd seen long ago, still memorable, still meaningful, but not overwhelming her current reality. She de-integrated Lyri's experiences as part of her larger soul's journey without being defined by them. Emma developed into an unusual child in the best ways, deeply compassionate, environmentally conscious, interested in astronomy and physics, but also in art and poetry. She had a quality of presence, of awareness, that seemed older than her years without being pretentious or uncomfortable. She made friends with other kids who felt different, who didn't quite fit the normal molds. Together they formed a group of creative, thoughtful children who approached the world with curiosity and kindness. Emma never talked to her friends about Kilara in detail, but she carried the lessons from that life into her current one. Dr. Foster stayed in touch with Emma's family over the years, checking in periodically to see how Emma was developing. By the time Emma was 12, the age Lyri had been during the final days on Kilara, the past life memories had settled into a comfortable integration with her current identity. Emma told Dr. Foster during one of their check-ins that she understood why she'd been born on Earth now. Humanity is facing some of the same challenges Kilara faced. Climate change, environmental destruction, running out of time to fix things before they become I think I came here to help people understand that it's real, that worlds can die, that we need to take care of this planet because we might not get another one. For a 12-year-old, it was a remarkably mature and clear articulation of purpose. Emma had transformed her trauma from Kilara into motivation for her current life. She'd found meaning in what she'd experienced, using it to fuel her passion for environmental advocacy and scientific education. She started a blog at 13, writing about climate change and space exploration, and the importance of becoming a multiplanetary species while also protecting the one planet we currently had. Her posts had a quality of urgency that came from genuine understanding of what it meant to lose a world. The blog attracted attention, particularly from the growing community of young climate activists. Emma became a voice in that movement, not as a leader necessarily, but as someone who could articulate why this mattered, why the stakes were real, why humanity needed to act before it was too late. She never publicly talked about Kilara or past life memories. She didn't want to be dismissed as delusional but privately, in conversations with Dr. Foster and her family, Emma maintained that her memories were real, that she carried wisdom from another world's mistakes, and that her current incarnation was specifically chosen to help Earth avoid Kilara's fate. Dr. Foster watched Emma's development with professional fascination and personal affection. Whether Emma's memories were literally true, whether Kilara existed as a physical planet in this universe, almost didn't matter. What mattered was that Emma had taken experiences that could have been traumatic, could have left her psychologically damaged, and had transformed them into purpose and compassion. By the time Emma was 16, she'd developed a specific career goal. She wanted to work in planetary science, studying how worlds died and how they could be protected. She wanted to search for habitable planets around other stars, continuing the work her father as Lyri had done, but with the advantage of starting from a stable world that still had time to save itself. Her academic performance reflected her passion. She excelled in physics and astronomy, won science fair competitions, got accepted into a prestigious university program at 17. Her application essay, which Dr. Foster had the privilege of reading, was titled Learning from Worlds We've Never Visited. It was a philosophical piece about how human imagination and possibly past life memory could teach us lessons from civilizations we had no direct historical record of, how the consistency of certain themes across cultures, consciousness that transcended individual lifetimes, suggested that wisdom could be transmitted through means science didn't fully understand. The essay was brilliant, showing both scientific rigor and spiritual openness. It got Emma into every program she applied to. Emma's parents, who had been so worried when their 5-year-old daughter cried about the wrong-colored sun, now watched her thrive. They'd never fully understood what Emma had experienced, whether the memories were real or some strange psychological phenomenon. But they'd supported her, had trusted Dr. Foster's guidance, had let Emma work through the memories instead of trying to suppress them. And the result was a remarkable young woman who carried wisdom beyond her years, who approached life with both the innocence of someone young and the depth of someone who had experienced loss and survival across lifetimes. Dr. Foster retired from clinical practice at age 72, but she stayed in touch with Emma, now in her early 20s, and working on advanced degrees in planetary science. They had lunch once a year, catching up, reflecting on the journey they'd been on together since Emma was 5 years old. "Do you still remember Kilara clearly?" Dr. Foster asked during one of these lunches. Emma thought about it. "Not as clearly as I did when I was little. It's more like the memory of a memory now, but I remember the important things. I remember what it felt like to live on a dying world. I remember my brother's face, my father's voice. I remember the orange sun and the purple sky. And I remember the lesson, which is that civilizations are fragile, that worlds can be lost, that we have to care for what we have because we might not get another chance." Emma paused, then added, "And I remember love. How even facing the end of everything, people still loved each other, still tried to save each other, still held on to hope even when logic said there was no hope left. That's what I carry from Kilara more than anything. The resilience of love and hope in the face of certain loss." Emma was 5 years old when she cried because Earth's sun was the wrong color, when she carried memories of watching her world die from a planet called Kilara that no telescope has ever found. Whether those memories came from a literal past life on another world or from some deeper symbolic layer of consciousness doesn't change what they taught her: that worlds are precious, that civilizations can end, that the light and warmth we take for granted could fade if we're not careful. She turned childhood trauma from another lifetime into purpose for this one, carrying forward the lesson that those who survived Kilara's end never got to apply. Take care of your planet, because you might not get another one. Subscribe for more memories from worlds we've forgotten, we've already lost.